Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge Raum für Notizen. Ich bin Sophie und mit mir hier sind heute Alexander Gehlsdorf und Hannah Savory von der Musicalgruppe Encore. Es ist Berlins erster fremdsprachiger Musiktheater-Verein. Interkulturelle Begegnungen, Akzeptanz, Freundschaft und Zugehörigkeit, unabhängig von Geschlechtsidentität, Sexualität, Alter und weiteren gesellschaftsbiografischen Merkmalen. Dafür steht Encore. Ich freue mich sehr, dass ihr heute da seid. Das Interview wird in Englisch sein, weil ihr ein internationaler Verein seid. Ja, hi, nice to meet you.
Hello, thanks
Would you
for
like to
having us.
introduce yourself first?
Yes, absolutely. Hannah Savory. I'm the chair of Encore and sometime musical director.
And I'm Alexander Gehlsdorf. I'm a regular member of Encore. So yeah, you can see me on stage.
Yeah, cool. Maybe we start with a simple question. What was your last musical you have seen?
Mine was actually Matilda in the West End. I took my 7-year-old son to see it, and he danced in the aisles at the end.
Oh, cool.
A few months ago I saw Six. They were touring through Berlin, so I was able to catch the show, and it was great.
Nice. Mine was probably Spring Awakening. I don't know if you know it. Yeah, it was in Lüneburg Small Theater. And yeah, so maybe we start big around the world with queerness in musicals, and then we can work our way further and further. If we look at the musical strongholds, New York and London, how would you describe the development of queerness in and around musical production, especially in the recent years?
Sounds like a question for you.
Certainly does. We are starting big. So I think it makes sense to start with New York and London, given that they are the two sort of big strongholds of musical theatre in general, and a great place to look at the overall global development of musical theatre and queerness in theatre. I mean, queerness has always been a part of musical theatre in terms of the community, but I think what we've seen in over the decades has been a move from a musical theatre being a space where people within the community were accepted sort of internally, as it were, but still presented very heteronormatively in terms of the stories that were being told and the characters that were being portrayed, has moved more gradually through a period of time where there was representation of queerness in the stories that were being told, but in a fairly fringe way and a very specific, here is a queer story, very often played by a straight actor, all the way now through to a much more sort of open and transparent and sometimes very celebratory representation in terms of the stories that are being told, but also in terms of the people who are participating in the telling of those stories being able to be more authentically represented in the stories that they're telling and the portrayals that they're giving on stage.
Do you have like examples from musicals on the Broadway that represent queerness very good for you?
Depends what you mean by good. Do you mean?
What does good mean for you?
Do you mean a sort of an accurate representation, a rounded representation of queerness? I mean, Broadway, maybe not, because unfortunately it didn't quite make it to Broadway yet, but a very recent example, we're looking very, very recently, there is a wonderful show called My Sons Are Queer, which played in the West End for a while and then went on tour and was most recently at Fringe. It's a one-person show written and performed by Rob Madge, who was actually the inspiration, the key song from that show was the inspiration for our latest production. But it's a one-person show, autobiographically sort of detailing this person's experience from being a young child who didn't fit in and didn't understand why, sort of from the outset, all the way through their journey of realization, acceptance, both self-acceptance and externally, and the way that they've embraced and celebrated that queerness and brought it to a stage. It's hilariously funny. It's very, very sad in places. I cried like a baby. But that, for me, is a really rounded and excellent depiction.
You just said that that queer musicals didn't make it to the Broadway. Yeah, my impression is too that most of the big musicals that run there are very heteronormative. Do you have an explanation for that?
Well, I mean, I was talking specifically about that one musical. It was supposed to open on Broadway and unfortunately didn't, but hopefully will make it there. I mean, you're absolutely right. There is still a big discrepancy between the community itself and what is represented by that community on stage in terms of the heteronormativity of mainstream musical theatre. You know, as we spoke about briefly earlier, musicals are an expensive business, unfortunately for us. And the stories that are told, I mean, they come from, some of them are true stories with, you know, historical representation. Some of them are adaptations. Some of them are original stories. But, you know, the thread that combines them all is that they need to be commercially appealing to as broad an audience as possible. And if we look back a couple of decades, that very much meant being heteronormative and telling heteronormative stories or through this sort of heteronormative framework. We are starting to see, and in the last 10, possibly 15 years, starting to see that appeal broaden more and more acceptance as society evolves of a broader commercial appeal of queerness in musical theatre, which, you know, is represented in a lot of the newer shows. Still not enough of them, for sure, but some of the newer shows that have both made it big on Broadway, if we think about things like The Prom or Everybody's Talking About Jamie, which were both adapted into movies very successfully, and into smaller shows like Hedwig and the Angry Inch or My Sons Are Queer or Fun Home or some of the smaller, more independent productions. It's moving in the right direction. But
it's moving in the right direction during the last 15 years, you said. But when I remember my researches, in the 1920s, a large revue, cabaret and operetta scene developed both in America and Germany, especially in Berlin, and in which queerness also became a bigger topic. But due to cultural reforms during the Second World War, many of these plays were banned, and they still influence the operetta scene today. Does the musical theatres of the 1920s play a role for your pieces and your work?
Well, indirectly. I mean, we're not directly referencing it in our work, but you can draw a line basically from the work that they were doing to where musical theatre is now, because a lot of, as you mentioned, a lot of the people involved in that scene in the 1920s were queer, but also Jewish people who then were also instrumental in sort of creating the early German sound film scene before the Nazis took over. There were things like the Tonfilm Operette who were largely influenced by that. Now, because of the rise of the Nazis, a lot of these people fortunately were able to emigrate to the United States, where they then in turn were working in the Broadway musical scene, which also then influenced the Hollywood musical. So, and then in turn the Hollywood musical influenced Broadway again, and now here we are. So there is sort of this domino effect. So in a sense, we do sort of owe the current status quo of the musical theater to these pioneers back in the 1920s who were doing that work.
Okay. How would you describe then the diversity on the musical scene in Germany, or especially in Berlin?
I think you're watching more musicals than I do, so you probably...
Unfortunately, not too many in Berlin. So I would say musical theatre in Germany is evolving. And, you know, it's funny looking at the origins of what we see as the musical theatre scene today, having these roots in Germany. If we look at the more mainstream productions, there's still not as much representation. So, for example, touring musicals will often have quite a limited time that you see in Germany, and in Berlin in particular. But that's looking at the bigger, sort of more mainstream. If you look at Germany, and particularly Berlin, as a development ground for more independent theatre, I think, you know, there's real potential, and there is a huge amount of diversity in what can be seen. But in terms of the musical theatre that makes its way to Germany, it is still quite limited in terms of needing that broad appeal that we talked about, and the sort of musical theatre that we're discussing, that we'd like to see more of, that is not just queer stories, but really sort of the what am I trying to say? The demonstration of the diversity that exists, and not just, oh, here is a musical about a queer person. Yeah. I would say, and feel free to disagree, hasn't quite made it to the extent that we might hope.
But we are on our way, and we have projects like Encore. Would you like to tell me something about your project, your Verein? It's the first foreign language musical theatre association as a Verein in Berlin.
As a Verein, yes, that's correct. We were gegründet in 2022. Yes, 2022. I should know that. It's been busy, and we started the Verein with the goal in mind of providing a home for both the international community and the Berlin community, from all walks of life, where people who have a passion for musical theatre, both on and off stage, could come, find a community, find a stable, accepting community where their stories could be told, and be told with love, regardless of whether that be a queer story or not. And we have worked very, very hard over the last few years to build that community. We've got a fantastic group now of more or less 40 people, if you include our Fördermitglieder, to whom we're very, very grateful, and have produced some really fun, really high-quality productions in that time that I'm incredibly proud of.
Yeah, great. And what are especially your guidelines and values you work with?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on air. I'll tell you what, I'll say it, and if I'm not allowed to say it, you can cut it. Sure. So we have our formal Satzung, which is the more legal side of how we work, and then we have our handbook. And the members' handbook is essentially what guides the expectations and behaviour, both from a logistics and practical point of view, but also from how we expect our members to interact with other members of the community. And I think it can be summed up very well with the "don't be a dick" clause, which is specifically there to ensure that people are, and honestly, with the group that we have, we don't really need to say it, but we do anyway. Our key principle is ensuring that we bring quality output to the stage which reflects the input that everybody puts in, but very specifically doing it in a way, or in an environment in which everybody is free to express themselves authentically, without fear of judgment or prejudice, with zero tolerance for bullying, discrimination on the grounds of basically anything. So it's very, very important. It's very central to how we operate, and it guides everything that we do.
And sure, also for your stage plays you choose. Alex, you were the cast for the male lead roles in the last two plays. What do you like about your stage performances, your stage plays?
For me, in the first place, it's great that I get to do this at all, because despite now being in this group, I'm not really a musical theater person. Like, I have a big music background and I have a big theater background. And I mean, now it's kind of makes sense to combine that, but I never would have even considered that. So it's an incredible opportunity to be able to perform these characters in the first place. I can't think of any other environment where I would be able to do that, where I would be able to perform as the lead character in a show. And so I'm most of all, I'm just incredibly grateful for that, and it's amazing that I get to combine music and theater, like two things that have always meant a lot to me in this form.
Which role did you like the most until now?
I'd have to say one of the most interesting ones was in this year's production of Next to Normal. I was playing Gabe, and that's a it's not only a very challenging role musically, but also performance-wise. There's a lot of really interesting, intricate character dynamics going on, and was definitely just one of the most challenging roles I had to play that yet, and also a role that I just haven't done before in that, in that style. So I was really excited to tackle that, and I was also kind of in awe of the role. But well, thanks primarily to your guidance, I think I pulled it off.
You certainly did.
Yeah, great. What criteria do you use to select your stage projects?
Actually, we're quite limited in what we can select because of the criteria that we sort of have to use. I think I referred earlier to the cost of putting on a production. Yeah. So, that really guides a lot of what we do. One of our founding principles, and one of the things we're really, really proud of, is that we use live musicians for all of our full productions rather than using backing tracks. And it's wonderful because it brings us this lovely musical integrity and allows us to work with musicians and bring something extra special to the stage. It is, however, a little limiting in the number of shows that are available to us, because if the band size is too big, we can't fit them on a stage and we can't afford them. So that's the first, because we do pay all of our musicians. Yeah. That's the first thing we need to consider. We consider the story itself, if it's a story that we would like to tell, and a story that we should tell. So, for example, we would stay away from stories which are not ours to tell from, for example, an ethnic or racial perspective. Whether the license is available, obviously, is a big one, and there's a theatre available that will accommodate the size of the show. And also, we have to consider our members and the people that we have who want to be involved in the project, and whether they can be represented with the characters that feature in the show. Okay. It narrows it down. The funnel gets very, very narrow towards the end, and like I said, we are limited by often the two key limiting factors are the rights and the musician availability. Okay. But we've done okay so far.
Oh, so far. What does queerness in musicals especially mean to you both?
Well, it's sort of a safe space to express yourself, and also to just, I think this is, for me, the amazing thing about being an Encore, that I'm just exposed to so many different people and so many different viewpoints, but it's all it's on an eye level, there isn't really a hierarchy, and there's such an amazing Austausch, how would you say it?
Exchange.
Just a wonderful exchange of ideas happening, and it's been incredibly enriching for me personally to be surrounded by these people and learn from them.
I think for me, if we look specifically at how it's reflected within Encore and look at it within that context, like Alex said, queerness is musical theatre. Is a space to express yourself and be free, but more importantly, it's a space of acceptance to explore, to make mistakes, to try something, and use that experience to get to know yourself better. Within Encore, we've had a number of members who've, within the safety of our group, have really explored their own identity and come to some conclusions about their identity even since they've joined the group, because they've had this this space and the freedom of expression and creation to do that, which is again something we're hugely grateful for and proud of as a community. And I think that it reflects, I guess, the spirit of musical theatre as a whole.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk a little about you and your jobs at Encore. You're the chairwoman, the musical director, sometimes cast member, sometimes director, and you're the owner of the team mascot. What's the team mascot?
The team mascot is a large rubber T-Rex named Stella.
Stella?
Stella,
okay.
Yes. I'm not sure why.
Okay.
But Stella belongs to my son. He is dinosaur obsessed. We're a dinosaur family. And Stella came into our lives actually before Encore came into our lives, I believe. But she came along to a group, a party of some description, was wildly popular, and since then has been the accompanying team mascot. I can't believe I didn't bring her today, but she has a bit of a broken leg at the moment, so we have to be a bit careful.
That's okay. Yeah, how do you dedicate yourself to several activities at Encore, and which role do you like the most?
I guess it doesn't take a huge amount of effort to dedicate myself to it because it means so much to me. It's really a passion project for me, and the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis make it very easy to want to do better. I feel like they bring the best out in me as a leader, and make the environment very, very easy for me to do so. I guess if I had to choose a favorite role, it would be musical directing, and I think I get a particular joy out of it at Encore because we have many people who have zero experience of musical theatre when they join. We have about half of our group can't read music, and watching these people learn and grow and achieve something on a weekly basis is just absolutely joyous, and seeing the pride and the joy that they all take in improving and putting something together and hearing the result is really incredible. Plus, I get to work with the bands, and that's always just a huge amount of fun.
Sounds good. Do you like being the boss?
Well, like Alex said, it's not a very hierarchical structure, so I don't really think of myself as the boss. There are 5 of us on the board, and we are very, very collaborative in the work that we do. But more broadly than that, it's a diplomatic organisation. The big decisions are made with the input of the group. So I would call myself more of the, I don't know, who steers the ship. I'm the one that steers, but everybody else plays their part.
Okay, so then my next question is probably for you both. And when you work on it together, when do you stop working on a play or on a rehearsal? When is it perfect?
When the deadline approaches, and it just has to be. At some point, there's always things to tweak. We had a great or a fantastic kind of experience just recently where we just basically, as a challenge to ourselves, we learned all of Les Miserables in one weekend. And then you just have to, if you just have one weekend, then you just have to make the decision, okay, this is good enough. And of course, based on what kind of show we do and what the deadline is and how much time we have to work on something, that standard just changes. So we're always striving to be as good as we can under the circumstances. But there are extreme cases like a weekend a workshop where that standard has to be lower than it is for a professional show. And so sometimes, but I'd like to think we always do end at a point where we're all satisfied.
I think people enjoy the weekend workshops because it's the only time they'll hear me say, it's good enough, let's move on. Otherwise, we keep working and we keep polishing until the curtain opens. Okay. And even then, I'm sitting there taking notes. Okay.
Yeah, so we're not quite at the end, but the show is called Raum für Notizen. And so you told us a note you wrote down. And then I would ask my colleague Bea to bring us the boards, so you can write it down and we can talk about it. Yes. You get the...
Thank you.
Do you have the same note?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Then I can write down my note on one, maybe. We don't need 2 boards with the same, I think.
Oh, my handwriting.
Yeah, the note is like for something that was important for you in our interview and that you would like to remember. Like for me, it is like this. You have the email. Would you like to start and show us your note?
Yes.
Okay. Berlin needs more spaces for creative development. What do you mean by that?
Well, we can tackle this from different angles. For me personally, it's sort of what I was talking about earlier, that having these spaces to, explore yourself, to be creative, to get in contact with other people can be incredibly enriching, not just for the individual, but also for the entire group. And I guess a factor we haven't really talked about yet, which also is included in this, is also what this then does to the audience, maybe to our family members who don't get to see us in that way, and how that just opens up whole new conversations and helps further acceptance and just understanding in general.
Yeah, nice. Would you like to add something, or is everything said?
No, I mean, this was really the starting point for the group. Yeah. You know, it's something that we're trying to tackle in our own very, very small way, as part of a much larger need, I would say.
Okay. So my note is, musical is queer. A reminder. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
That's it. I don't have a lot of explanation, but yeah, if you agree, that's fine.
Self-explanatory.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so yeah, what are your plans for the future with Encore?
Well, you have nothing concrete because we're currently in the process of choosing our next big show, and as Hannah explained, that's sort of a wild ride because there's so many factors to consider, and then even if you break it down to just a handful of shows, then we still have to pitch all of these shows to the group. Then it's a democratic process in choosing the show, and we're right in the middle of that.
Okay. Although we do have plans for another smaller concert in the meantime, to ensure that everybody's still got something to do and nobody's slacking off. So we'll have a concert which we'll be announcing very, very soon, around the end of January, beginning of February, but it'll be a much smaller scale sort of review, cabaret type event, which we're really looking forward to. I'm really excited about the theme.
Yeah, cool. And do you fear any challenges concerning?
I fear many challenges.
Okay. Maybe the smallest or the biggest.
I'll start with the biggest, actually. And our biggest challenge, I would say, is our most regular challenge, and that is a slightly different interpretation of this, which is actually space. Yeah. So finding space to perform. Like I said, if we're using live musicians, we're very limited by the space that we have, and Berlin is not super well furnished with theatres of a sort of medium size which welcome Gastspiele. So we're quite limited in the number of spaces in which we're able to, and because we and everybody else is limited, the availability in those spaces is hugely competitive. So that's practically our most biggest, our biggest challenge.
Yeah, and related to that, a challenge that we kind of keep running into over and over again is that when we get one of these spaces, usually we can't actually work in the space until like the day before opening night, and so usually just the 2 days leading up to the show are the most stressful because there's so many factors. Like we just don't know the space. We're probably too many people for the backstage area. We need to figure out where do we put all our costumes, where are the props, what's the technical situation. We probably have to do like all the sound check and the tech setup like basically the day off, or if we're lucky the day before the show. And this is just something we can't really avoid. Like we were kind of forced into just doing everything last minute because we just don't have physical access to the space beforehand.
Or the money to do so.
Yeah.
So yeah, money and space are.
Okay. Yeah, I hope it all works out, and I wish you a very good luck. Like, do you have a personal motto, like one power phrase that gives you strength?
No, I probably shouldn't say wrong and strong, should I? Because we
you
want
just said
everybody. I did just say it. No, it's something that I say a lot in rehearsal when we need people to believe in themselves a bit better, because people, when they think they might be a bit wrong, tend to pull themselves. They don't know exactly what they're doing. So we go with wrong and strong.
Okay.
Give it your best, and then we can tweak it afterwards.
That sounds great. Hannah and Alex, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.
We're doing a Polaroid photo at the end, and then I wish you a very nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ja, Und das war es dann auch schon mit dieser Folge Raum für Notizen, Queerness in Musicals. Ich hoffe, es hat euch gefallen zuzuschauen. Ich hatte ein sehr schönes Gespräch mit euch. Die Folge könnt ihr natürlich auch immer im Kosmos nachschauen. Viel Spaß dabei und bis bald.
Dankeschön.